Joe Flacco may have just won the Browns starting quarterback job without barely lifting a finger. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Kenny Pickett's hamstring injury has suddenly thrown a major wrench into the Browns quarterback competition. The second most important battle at camp is happening at wide receiver, and today's the day, Monday, that the evaluation really begins for this team. I do want to thank you for being on every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well, and it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And, of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, we got the news over the weekend. It came down Sunday afternoon that Kenny Pickett is dealing with a hamstring injury that he suffered late in the week of practice. What was weird about this popping up on our radar was that Kenny didn't seem like he was bothered by anything at practice the last couple of days leading up to Sunday when the news came down. We saw him actually taking like the last snaps. He threw a touchdown pass on the last snap of practice on Saturday where he sort of booted to his right and then found Blake Whiteheart for a touchdown on a really nice ball, actually. And you saw him sort of walking off, pumping his fist and excited. And then he was standing on the field after that. There's an extra period that some of the players participated in. It's a lot of rookies, a lot of lower end depth chart guys. I know Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel both took snaps during it, called the opportunity period. It's just kind of like an extra 11-on-11 session after practice to get some work in. And he was kind of standing out there watching. I don't believe he took any snaps. I had my back to the session for a little bit because I was listening to some of the press conferences. But like he was out there and it didn't seem like he was bothered by anything. So this must have been something that popped up sort of after practice and then transpired into Sunday, where we're now getting this report that he is dealing with a hamstring issue and that he'll have to be reevaluated after missing some practices and missing some time. There's some good news and bad news with this. The good news on the Kenny Pickett side is that it's early in camp. It was only 4 days in, so he has some time here to recover. The bad news is, of course, on two fronts. First, that hamstring issues, those soft tissue issues, are so unpredictable. You never know if they're going to be something that lingers or if it's going to be something that resolves itself in like a week's time, which is why it kind of sounds like they're going to shut him down for a little bit and then be week to week with his evaluation and where he's at and whether or not he's going to be ready to take the field again. A week from now, the Browns will be having a practice next Monday that leads into them traveling to Carolina for a joint practice with the Carolina Panthers. So, there's limited time here for him to really sort of stand out now. And that sort of changes the math a little bit on this quarterback competition. And so we'll see when he's able to get back. I don't want to speculate at all. I'm sure we'll talk to Kevin Stefanski on Monday and he'll give us a very vague answer about his status and kind of where he's at. But yeah, you just never know. I mean, we've seen hamstring issues get resolved pretty quickly. We've seen hamstring issues last for weeks on end. And so it's unclear at this time how this will play out for Kenny Pickett. But like I said, the good news for him and anybody who maybe thinks Kenny Pickett should be the starting quarterback on this team is that he has the best amount of time possible with just 4 days into camp to try to recover and to try to get back out there. And so it's just a matter of whether or not he can get back sooner rather than later. And the Browns will maybe provide a little more clarity on that. We'll see. But as far as the rest of this room goes, like this obviously opens up a lot more reps for the other three guys, Flacco, Gabriel, Shedeur. And Flacco now he already had the inside track, I would say, to win the starting job. And it's because of other things I've talked about before. Knows the offense, was here in 2023, They know what to expect from him. He's a 17-year veteran. There's not a huge learning curve with him. You're not worried about him going out there and being the captain of this offense and the conductor of this offense because you feel good about how he operates. And so I think what we were seeing was him getting less reps because of that, because they understand where he's at, especially these first few days of camp. But now it's like he has an even larger lead in this competition. He's going to have a chance to really cement himself, if you will, as the starting quarterback if Pickett's going to miss time. And if Pickett's going to miss significant time, he's going to be playing Pickett, that is. He's going to be playing catch-up from here on out in camp as he tries to come back from this hamstring issue, and that could sort of derail his hopes of winning the job. It's kind of fun. It's not funny that he got hurt, but it's weird. Like sometimes these things, how they work themselves out, right? Like you don't always expect there to be injuries. You certainly don't root for injuries, but sometimes just by addition by subtraction, these types of things happen. And then it makes things a little clearer for everybody on who's going to win the job. And it's not the way you want to see the competition go down. You want to see a truly hard fought competition where, you have the two veteran guys who are probably more likely to win the job than the two rookies, and see what they can kind of, all do together and find your find your starting quarterback by the time the season rolls around. But unfortunately, with just where things are at right now, Pickett being now out for some period of time and Flacco being able to sort of embrace that starting role, I don't like it. It certainly feels like he's in line now even more than he was to be that starting quarterback for the Browns. And if he misses significant time, that's even more the case. Like if he misses the next couple weeks, if he misses joint practices with Carolina, if he misses even beyond that, joint practices with the Eagles, those are key evaluation periods the Browns are going to use to decide who their starting quarterback is. And if he's not part of that, then yeah, I think Flacco obviously has the clear inside track to be the starter for this Browns team come week one. I also am curious now, as I've talked about numerous times, with more opportunities for the other three, will Shedeur Sanders finally get a chance to play with the first team? I'm envisioning already a lot more first-team reps for Dillon Gabriel because he's taken first-team reps already to a degree. But now I'm kind of wondering, okay, will they put more on Shedeur's plate and give him a chance to kind of see what he can do? I've been waiting for those first-team reps for Shedeur to happen. I thought with how he played in the spring, I thought he kind of earned them, but it's become pretty evident that they've put more on Gabriel's plate than Shedeur's. They believe, I'm not saying they're right, but they believe that he is further ahead than Shedeur Sanders in terms of his development and his readiness to take on certain things. And so we'll see if that changes this week as the pads come on. And, Shedeur can do himself some major, major favors if he get with these extra reps that he's going to get with the twos, maybe with the ones finally. If he starts to, if he shows some nice things and he really cements and he puts on a show, absolutely, that could help him in this race and maybe trying to get higher in the depth chart and surprise these guys as they come to a final decision in the coming weeks, or they try to determine their final decision in the coming weeks. But yeah, the Pickett injury has thrown a wrench very much so into this quarterback competition. We'll see how long it takes Kenny Pickett out for, if you will, and we'll just have to kind of follow along with the news and information. I'll be sure to get that to you as much as I can. And beyond that, it sort of sets the tone for Flacco now to very much be in line to start for this team if Pickett is out for an extended period of time, but maybe even if he's out for a short period of time, because let's face it, like Flacco's the one guy who didn't have to pick things up with this offense or learn things in this offense. He knows what he's doing. And the other three, it's learning a new playbook and all that. Obviously 2 rookies, you're learning a lot because you're coming to the NFL for the first time. But even for Pickett, there was a lot of learning going on. And now he's going to have to sort of do that as a spectator rather than out on the field. The second biggest position battle behind quarterback is on the offensive side of the ball. It's at wide receiver. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Football is nearly back. We're in training camp right now, which means fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. All the things that you love about fantasy football can be found at Yahoo Fantasy. Of the handful of fantasy leagues I participate in each year, my favorite one, hands down, is the league hosted via Yahoo Fantasy. This has been my longest standing league. It does help that the people in it, hyper competitive. The smack talk is elite, but the hosting platform can oftentimes make or break a fantasy experience for people, and Yahoo has mastered it. My friends and I are having a lot of fun playing Yahoo Fantasy. You should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your 1 millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. All right, so I teased it before the break here that the second most important position battle on this team right now is, in my estimation, at the wide receiver position. There's a number of other areas you can look at in terms of guys trying to win jobs or earn jobs or compete with each other. You know, I've talked at length before about the defensive end spot opposite of Miles and how Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright are sort of duking it out there. And even Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, to a degree, is getting some rotation. But it's those top two guys that you're seeing most prominently out there. And I think Isaiah McGuire has actually gotten more of the first team reps than even the other two. So that's where that one kind of stands at this juncture. And we'll certainly talk more about that throughout training camp. But the wide receiver room is an interesting setup because I kind of went into camp expecting that Diontae Johnson is one of the more seasoned vets of this room, even though I understand the off the field, or I guess it was an on the field thing where he didn't enter the game last year and there's some questions there. Even understanding all that, I viewed him as maybe one of the next wide receivers in line behind Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. Like that he was going to be sort of more prominently involved with the ones, and that he'd be out there more frequently. But that just has not been the case. Even with him being one of the more experienced guys in this room, he hasn't been as prominently rotating in with the higher units, if you will. And so he appears lower on the depth chart, at least based on these first couple days, than I expected. DeAndre Carter and Jamari Thrash have been getting more first team reps as I've noticed than what Diontae Johnson has. And I think that's pretty telling. This team knows that they don't have a lot of experience there. They know that that wide receiver is sort of a weakness for them, but they are riding it out with this group, and they are hoping and banking on some of these guys taking leaps. One of the biggest is Cedric Tillman, of course, and it does help when you understand and going into the season you're going to be doing a lot more 12 personnel, right? Which is why we've talked about Harold Fannin lining up in the slot a lot. Maybe you don't have to rely on so many receivers down the depth chart to help your offense, because you have other guys that can get involved via the tight end position. So that's an interesting sort of conversation and an interesting setup. But at the same time, you still need to have, like, wide receiver is such a valuable position in this league. You still need to have guys that can make plays for you and that you can rely on, because you're going to have to pass the football to win in this league. It's just the way it works. Like, I know they want to run the football and make that their bread and butter again, but they also need to have a complementary passing game. And so we'll see if that is something that sort of comes to fruition for them and how they set that up. But they're banking on a lot of guys taking leaps, which is why I say this is the second most important position battle happening on the field right now and at training camp, because they need guys to emerge. They need guys to step up. They need to see players already started taking those leaps, if you will, and becoming the players that they hope they can be as fixtures in this offense and contributors in this offense. There's a lot that they are sort of banking on. And so I think you've seen some of that. I think Jamari Thrash has sort of flashed in some moments and shown you some things, like he's improved. Cedric Tillman, he had the one day where he jumped up for a ball in the back of the end zone and kind of came down and had to leave the field. But then he was back out there on Saturday, and now the pads come on. You got to see how some of these guys like a Cedric Tillman can sort of hold up. And DeAndre Carter, when they signed him, I wasn't really banking on him being a major factor in the offensive side of things. We know he's a great returner, and we all expected he was going to be involved in that. But he's been really involved in the offensive part of this and running a lot of routes and catching a lot of passes. Like I said, he caught a touchdown from Dillon Gabriel on Saturday. So there are reasons to see them trying to utilize a lot of these different guys and see how it all kind of shakes out. But again, you're sort of hoping and wishing for a lot of development from a lot of these guys that aren't necessarily the most dependable receivers, that at least at this stage of their careers. And so, listen, in general, the passing game and the offense is missing a sense of explosiveness. Listen, we're going to talk coming up about why things really, like the evaluation really starts when the pads come on. But at the same time, like these first couple days where it's been, just helmet and shoulder pads they had on Saturday, and it's not as physical. Those are the days the offense should be able to make some plays, right? And listen, this is also understanding, like there's not, it's hard to block guys when you don't have full pads on and stuff too. And I've always said, like, the defense is ahead of the offense, but for the offense to be at this stage of the offseason not hitting any like bigger chunk plays and those being few and far between is also a little concerning, as I talked about over the weekend, because it speaks to the offense just not having, all the things that they maybe the weapons that they had hoped they had. And I think they know that. But it's they're asking a lot of guys to step up here. And so I am closely monitoring, like, who's up with who, with which groups, and who's catching the passes and who's making the plays, because this is an area that they might have to address before the season starts if they don't feel like they have that there's something missing, or there's an element missing from that group specifically. And it is a massively important group to prioritize, and they have to, start to see some progress there and see guys take those next steps, because frankly, again, there's a lot of unknowns, and that's why I think it's the most important group, like, battle behind the quarterback position, because you're looking for answers. You are looking for players that you can count on and be dependable in this offense. And I just don't know that there's a lot of them in that room right now until they prove us otherwise. I will say this: Luke Floriea has flashed early on in camp. He's looked really, really good. He's caught passes from just about every quarterback. He seemed to have some nice chemistry with Dillon Gabriel, because, they ran a lot together, especially like the threes or like these first couple days. And I know there was the touchdown pass Shedeur Sanders threw to him on, I think it was Saturday. So there's been some really nice tape from Luke Floriea, the Kent State undrafted rookie that they brought in for rookie mini camp, and then they signed to the 90-man roster. And I'm fascinated to see if he can carve out a spot for himself on this roster. What's tough is, like, he's probably more of a practice squad guy. Like, I would envision he probably ends up on the practice squad. They stash him. But what I find interesting about it is, listen, I said it, like, a very inexperienced group. So if there's one room where you feel like maybe somebody can sneak in or sneak on the roster, the 53, when it's all said and done, because they had a better camp than maybe somebody else, it's that room. So I'm not ruling out that Floriea makes the 53, but ultimately I would guess or estimate that he ends up as a practice squad guy when it's all said and done. But he's had a really good camp so far. He's been one of the bigger playmakers in this group, and I think the Browns are looking for more, which is why that position group is such a valuable one to be watching right now, and why it stands for me to be the second most important battle kind of happening and playing out in Berea this week and during training camp, because you need a lot of answers there, and you need them fast. Monday, today, starts the real evaluation of these guys, and I'll tell you why. Coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot in the Keen, where you've been for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping, and that's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% with their last-minute killer deals Last year, I used Gametime for the very first time. I bought tickets for my wife and I to go see Ohio State, Michigan. Game we've always wanted to go to. It was, we were so excited about it. And obviously the results of the game with Michigan winning for the fourth straight year was unfortunate, but we do get to say we saw the eventual national champions in person. And with the transparent pricing and panoramic sea views, Gametime instantly from that experience became my go-to app for buying tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so yes, these first 4 days have shown us some things in terms of where this team is at, guys they're banking on, what they're trying to do offensively to a degree. But the real evaluation starts today. It starts on Monday. And the reason I say that is, as I've talked about, the pads are coming up. Like, it's one thing to evaluate guys when they're in helmets and jerseys and even shoulder pads and helmets, and they're out there running around doing some things. But we know, like, there's only so much you can do, and there's only so much you can glean from, like, the offensive line versus the defensive line when they don't have full pads on. They're not really, like, going at each other. There's only so much you can glean from a player who knows he's not going to actually get tackled, right? Or who has to make a tackle. Like, I can't tell you the number of times as we've watched these plays sort of go down. Sometimes it's like a sack on the quarterback. And no, they won't actually sack the quarterback even with full pads on, but they'll blow plays dead, understanding like, okay, this would have been a sack in this instance, and they'll kind of call it. These first 4 days, it's been like, well, we think that would have been a sack, but could Kenny Pickett have gotten his way out of it? Could Shedeur Sanders have weaseled his way out of this one? Like, there's always those questions in that gray area. Now that goes away. So you'll know, like, okay, he sacked. Or, okay, there was a play I counted as a touchdown where Joe Flacco threw an out route to Jerry Jeudy, and he was like 2 yards shy of the end zone, and there was a corner sort of coming down from the top to tackle him, maybe short of the goal line, and he was able to sort of turn up field real quick with the 2 yards along the sideline and get the ball in. But we all kind of said, like, maybe he would have been short. I was being generous and gave him the touchdown, but it was a close play. Now we'll know. Did he get stopped short? Did he score? So those things matter. Once the pads come on is when the real evaluation can start for these guys. This is across the board. Each position group, each player, each team. Those are the moments where you start to get a better sense of who can play at this level and who can't. And younger guys, like, okay, it's great that somebody like Jamari Thrash, as I just talked about, has shown some progress in his game. Okay, now that the pads are on, and there's that fear of getting hit, or there's somebody coming over the middle to actually tackle you, you're still going to hang on to the football. Like, that's one thing he's really worked on, is catching the ball better. So I'm fascinated to see, as everybody should be, how that all kind of looks once the full pads are on and these guys are really like hitting each other for real. And it's going to be sort of this fascinating revelation to decide and find out, what the starters are really going to look like. Now, I think most of those jobs are sort of sorted out. But again, you kind of learn some new things once the pads go on. And so this is an exciting time for training camp because that starts today. And there are rules in the NFLPA. You're only you can't practice 3 straight days in full pads. So they practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. At least one of those days will not be in full pads. And I'm sure they'll have at least 2 of those 3 in full pads. And then they practice again coming up on Friday, leading into the weekend. So they'll have another sort of round of practices to get through. And then the pads will obviously be on when they practice against the Panthers next week for their joint practices. And that's where an even deeper evaluation can happen, because they love using those to find out what they have in certain players and who their starters are going to be and really sorting things out. But yeah, this is like the pivotal start of camp. Like, whatever stats you've seen online, and I know I've shared some, I know others have shared plenty of them. And we sort of log these things and just try to get a sense of where things are at. And I want to be clear too, when it comes to the quarterback competition specifically, because I got asked the other day, like, do people really care about this when it comes to like these stats and numbers of training camp? And I like to think that they do, or that you do. And for me, it's less about like the results all the time this time of year. until you get to joint practices and things. And it's more about the rep share and the rep count and how many guys are taking snaps with which team and how many guys are getting reps in each drill, whether it's 7-on-7s, whether it's 11-on-11s. Like, what does all that stuff look like? How many reps are they taking? How many snaps do they have? And you count all those things up and you kind of get a better picture of like, all right, here's how they are here's how many opportunities are given to each of these guys. And here's how it all sort of shakes out. I think that's what's valuable, especially at this time of year, as we're trying to decide who the starting quarterback is going to be, what that's going to look like in general, who's ahead of who. It's a lot about who's getting the most reps. And right now, I think Flacco's actually gotten some of the least reps, as we talked about, because I think they don't need to see Joe Flacco this time of year. It's the other three who are getting acclimated to either the NFL and the Browns or just the Browns offense and what they want to do with Pickett. And so, I think by design, they haven't had to give him as many reps, but I think that changes this week, especially with Pickett now dealing with the hamstring issue. You're going to see a lot more Flacco, especially with the ones. And, we know what Flacco can do when the pads are on. We know he's not going to be, afraid of those, the hits or the guys bearing down on him or any of that. But it's about the rest of the roster and also, the two young rookie quarterbacks as well, being able to show you what they can do as the bullets really start flying here. No, they won't be getting tackled, but, knowing that there's more intensity brought because the pads are on, this is where the real evaluation can start. So whatever the stats have been, whatever the numbers have been, we can throw them out from the first week. Not totally like the rep shares and things. I think that stuff has mattered, but throw most of that stuff out, and the real evaluation is starting today on Monday with pads coming on and things getting turned up a notch. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. We got plenty more to come this week. A lot of training camp practices on the horizon, including the next 3 days in a row. So we'll recap it all. We'll talk about it with you. Hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. And for your second listen, you can check out Locked On Bets, where betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks that you can't miss football futures. Or, as always, you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being on every day at the Locked On Podcast Network. I'll talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.